Good morning. Welcome to Green Thumb. So today's topic, as if you didn't notice, is going to be about composting. So as a young adult, my husband and I used to help our grandfather in a pretty large tree orchard here in a local area. So we had lots of debris, lots of leaves, lots of branches, lots of things that we could pile up in piles, and really we would just stick it off in a corner somewhere and throw some dirt on it, give it some water, turn it every now and again, and seemed to work out pretty good. But in order for me to teach you how to do this, I have to be a little more technical. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what goes in the compost pile. When you're done with your compost, you're going to end up with a nice, rich, black result. They call it black gold. It's humus or humus. I like hummus, so I'm going to call it hummus every now and again. Forgive me for that. But this is humus, and this is what happens when this kind of material is broken down. And this is what you would put in your garden. And you can top dress your plants with it. You can plant with it. It's a mild fertilizer. And it's something that you will have created on your own with the help of microorganisms, air, and water. So your three keys in composting is the materials that you use, the air circulation that it gets, and water, because the microorganisms that break up this product right here, these different ingredients, needs water in order to metabolize this material. So if you're not going to invest a whole lot of money into it, you can do these things with just very simple ingredients that you might have in your house. If you want to do a regular compost pile, you can do that with boards, with fencing, with just something to make yourself a square container, square area. It's usually you want to have about 3 foot by 3 foot wide and about 3 foot tall. And you want to locate it in a place, if you're going to do the compost bin, you're going to need to put it in a place where it can be protected from the cold and winds in the winter and from the heat in the summer. And you want it to be accessible. And probably not real close to the house if you can, because you never know, it might get a little stinky. Now if you do it properly, you do it the way you're supposed to, you shouldn't have a lot of smells coming out of it. But just in case you mess up, and that's okay, if you mess up, you can start over. It's no big deal. All we're doing is basically encouraging these materials to decay at a faster rate than they would in nature. So if you're going to do the little bin thing, what you're going to do once you've located the place where you want to put it, you're going to break up the soil in the bottom, because your compost bin needs to be in touch with the ground. And that's going to help with microorganisms, it helps with air circulation, it helps kind of keep moderate the moisture as well. So you want it to be contact to the ground. And the first layer that you put in there is what they call a carbon layer. And that is your dried brown leaves, twigs, small twigs. You don't want to go too big. So if you do have some big twigs, you want to make them smaller. Now if you don't make them small enough, they might end up still being in your compost when you're done. So you'll have your humus, and you'll have some sticks in there, which is no big deal. Just throw them out, throw them back in the compost pile, or cut them down a little more. You want them to be fairly small. If you have a lot of debris in your yard, this is probably the method you want to go with. I'll talk about the tumblers and the vermiculture later on, but if you've got a lot of big stuff, you can do the compost pile no problem. And there's plastic compost piles you can get as well, or composters you can get as well, that open up, that would give you your 3 by 3 by 3 area. But if you don't want to spend any money on it, just find some wood and maybe some fencing to give it some air circulation. Make yourself a 3-sided structure, and then maybe have a little board that you can put in front of it to keep it from spilling out. But you would start with tilling up your ground a little bit, breaking it up so it's not flat and level, just kind of bumpy. And you want to make, if it's not moist, moisten it. And then you're going to take a layer 6 to 8 inches worth of your carbon. They call this the carbon part of it. So this breaks down and gives you carbon. Now, I do happen to have a lot of daylily leaves here, and they can mat up, so you don't want things to mat in there. So you can always add a little bit of sawdust or wood chunks to kind of help break that up, to give it space in between, so that it doesn't mat. If it mats, it could rot. If it rots, well, we do want it to decay, but we don't want it to rot, because if it rots, it might make it get a little stinky. So if we do this right, we won't have a really stinky experience. Once we are done with it, you're going to have a nice fresh compost pile that you can have nice ingredients in and be able to use later as fertilizer. Now we've kind of got this level right here, so let's pretend this is kind of our little compost bin area. So we're going to put the layer down there, and if it's not moist, you can moisten it. You want to water it just till it's glistening. You don't need to saturate it, you just want it to be wet. Your compost pile should be wet like a sponge, not sopping wet, but when you wring out the sponge, it's still got moisture, but it's not dripping. That's kind of the moisture level we want for the compost. So now we'll put that layer down on the bottom, and then we're going to come in with our green waste, things that are green, weeds that you've pulled out. Now if you've got some noxious weeds in your yard, the composting should take care of it for you. It will get up to 150 degrees if it's done properly, which should kill those seeds, which should kill any kind of pathogens that might be in the soil for diseases and things like that. But if you've got a weed that you just hate and it's all over the place, probably should not put that in the compost pile, just in case. But anything else, you can take table scraps. This is called the nitrogen level. Anything that's green, this gives you your nitrogen. So that gives the little microorganism the energy it needs to break up the big, thick, heavy stuff, the brown stuff, the carbon layer. So now we're going to put a layer of the green stuff on top of our carbon layer, and you want it to be about 50-50. I did some research on this, and I did watch quite a few videos, and there's a broad range of what people do in their compost piles. So really, you can almost get away with anything, but if you put something in there like meat, you don't want to put meat, you don't want to put grease, you don't want to put cheese, you don't want to put milk in there. Those will attract critters, or could possibly attract critters. So you don't want to get rats and things like that in there. You could encourage some maggots. Maybe you don't really want maggots in there, but they will break things up for sure. But maybe that's not something you want to attract to your yard. So if you just stick with green things that are green, you don't want to use your dog and cat manure, any kind of manures that come from animals that eat grass or eat green things. No carnivore, you don't want anything manures of meat eaters in your pile. Again, it's a smell thing. It's not necessarily that it won't break down, because it will. It's just kind of a smell thing. So we got our layer now of the green. So you want about 50% carbon, the brown, and about 50% of the green. So we're going to do about 6 inches of brown, 3 to 6 inches of the green, and moisten that again. Now this is where you're going to throw in a layer of dirt. Now you can use your regular dirt in your yard, or you could use like the Malibu compost. And Malibu compost is a highly composted dairy cow manure. It's already been broken down, but what's really cool about it is it's loaded with microorganisms. And those are the guys that are going to come in here and chew up all this green and this brown waste and turn it into that nice black gold that we're looking for. So you could take a layer of the Malibu compost about 1 inch thick and put that over this, or you can take your dirt, that's fine too, and then put that over there. And then you would also, this would be your time that you would want to add your compost starter. Now we have a couple compost starters. We have one called a compost starter, and this one has in it, it has blood meal, feather meal, bone meal, dried chicken manure, bat guano, alfalfa meal, kelp meal, and potassium sulfate. So this is not only, it's a fertilizer, but what it does is it jumpstarts those microorganisms. It gives them the energy that they need to chew this stuff up and metabolize it. So you can also use crab meal. This one we get from a company called Down to Earth, and they use restaurant quality crab in their stuff. So this is not only, it's chocked full of microorganisms as well, but it's also going to be healthy for the soil. When you, as it breaks down and you put this around your plants, some of these nutrients are going to transfer into those plants as well. So this is also, you could do them both if you really wanted to, because really all we're trying to do is to get this stuff to break down. So if it burns it, no big deal. You know, you're afraid to put fertilizer on things because it might burn. This is the case where it really doesn't matter. It can burn it all at once. All it's going to do is going to cause those microorganisms to speed up faster and get this process moving a little bit quicker. So now you've got your brown on the bottom, you got your green, you got a layer of dirt, you got your compost starter now that you sprinkled on there, and then you're going to want to water that down. And then you're going to continue to do those layers as long as you've got the material to do it. Go as high as you can. If you don't have enough material, you can make your layers a little bit thinner. You could do 3 inches of brown, 3 inches of green, just a thin layer of the dirt and some of the compost, and continue it that way until you've run out of what you want. Now you can add to it as you go after you've turned it, and we'll get into that later on. Okay, so now we've got our layers, and we're going to come to the top. Now, one video I saw, they put just burlap over the top of it. The books that I read, or the other information that I got, said to put a layer, about a 2 to 3 inch layer of dirt over the top of that. So again, you can use the compost, you could use your dirt and the compost, whatever you want to do. Really, it doesn't matter, because you're still going to get a good result in the end. It's just a matter of how long is it going to take. So that dirt, that layer of dirt on the top, is also going to help to keep the smells and the gases in. As these things break down, they give off nitrogen gas and methane, and that's the stinky stuff. So if we've got it built properly, we've got good air circulation, we've got the moisture going on there. Now if it's too wet and it starts to rot, you'll get a smell. And you can pull it out and lay it back out, let it dry out, and then start over again. So really, guys, there's no way that you can mess this up. I mean, what's the worst case scenario? It breaks down slower? Big deal. So either way, and if you did really get tired of it, you could throw it in the trash and be done with it. But I think if you stick with it, you'll be happy with your results. And it's going to save a little bit of our landfill. You know, this stuff doesn't have to go into the landfill. If we want to use it, we can break it down and help our garden and our soil. So I think it's a win-win. So now we've got, now you can use a compost thermometer, and we do sell those on a fairly regular basis. We happen to be out of them right now, but we're certainly going to get some in. And you would monitor the temperature of your compost pile. This can get up to about 150 degrees. So if you're a geek and you like this kind of stuff, then you can monitor the temperature, and once you'll see it'll peak, and then as it starts going back down, now it's time, as it's gone down in temperature, it's time to turn it. If you're not the plant geek and you don't want to mess with the thermometer, you're going to turn this thing about every 2 weeks. So if you put your board up there so that you can remove it, it might make it a little bit easier for you to get in there, and you're going to turn your compost, and you just want to turn it over. And as you're turning it, you're going to see, ooh, do I have some problems? Is it staying too wet? Maybe it's not wet enough. And then you can adjust it as you go. Couple, 2, 3 times of you turning this, you should start seeing your nice humus, your nice humus that you're going to be able to use in your garden. Now, the awesome thing about this too is you can also put a layer of straw on the top of it if you have access to that, and that will help it to stay moister in the summer, and in the winter it helps it to stay warm. So that's pretty much it on the compost pile. Again, you can put pretty much anything you want to in there. I saw one guy where he was adding chips and all kinds of things, but I would just rather use the green stuff and not have to worry about the critters. Okay, so now we're going to talk about tumblers. Now this is another way to do your compost, is a tumbler. And really, if you have smaller things, if you have lots of table scraps, let's say you do a lot of cooking and you've got a garden, and so you're bringing in stuff from the garden, you've got excess scraps and this and that, the tumbler needs to be smaller pieces. One of the things that they recommended was taking your lawnmower and going over it. Another thing that you can put into your compost is your lawn clippings, your grass clippings. If they're green, they're the nitrogen level. If they're dried out, they're going to the carbon level. Either way, when you do your tumbler, if you can mow over it, I would assume you have a mower. If you don't, then you just want to make sure that your pieces are as small as you can possibly get them, because you want them to break down quickly. There's usually enough moisture in your table scraps when you're doing the tumbler that you don't have to worry about moistening it. Although you can tell if it seems like it's really dry, again, you want it to be like a wrung out sponge, like it's still moist but it's not sopping wet. So then you're going to put your ingredients into the tumbler. You're going to throw in a handful of either the Malibu compost, or you're going to put in some dirt from your ground, because that has the microorganisms that kind of jump starts. And also using your compost starter is a helpful thing. So then you put about 50-50. So if you got carbon, 50% carbon, again, 50-50 is kind of the key here. 50-50 green, 50-50 of the brown carbon stuff goes into your composter. Every 2 days, you're going to give it a turn. Every 2 days, we'll give it a turn. After about 2-3 weeks, depending upon what you put in there, it should be nice and again, this is what we're after. So once it reaches this state, you're done. So then you can start over again. Now let's say you do a lot of cooking, so you're going to have some table scraps. You can go ahead and add them in there and just keep turning it. But after one point, you're going to have to kind of let it cook off, and then we'll put it in a little pile somewhere else, or they have little bins that you can put it in while you're waiting. They also talk about saving old leaves in your yard. Just have a little place that you can save some of the old leaves to give you the carbon layer. You can also use shredded paper, newspaper, and cardboard as your carbon layer as well. So I was thinking, I've got a bunch of stuff I need to shred, and I'm just tired of shredding stuff. I'm going to put that in my composter, right? So, hey, that's a win-win. So anyway, so now we've got this method here as well. And then there's a third method that I'm going to talk about just briefly, is vermiculture. And that's using earthworms to do all the work. And the result of this process is going to be earthworm castings. So we've already got it bagged up, obviously, and this is another thing that you can throw in your compost pile as well, because again, this one is chock full of worm poop and those microorganisms. And I want to say, it seems like the worms come out of this stuff. So whether there's eggs or whatever's in there, it seems like it just helps the process. But this is what you're going to end up getting when you do your vermiculture, which is just composting with worms. Now we do have a few types of composters here, worm composters, I guess you call it. This one is called the Worm Feast, and this one actually goes down into the soil. So you're going to dig a hole and you're going to put this down into the soil. This comes off. You put your scraps and things in here. Again, try to do a 50-50. Again, small stuff. Lots of table scraps. These are good for table scraps. What's nice about the vermiculture is you don't need a big area. Obviously, our compost over here takes up a little more space. If you're using the compost bin, it's going to be like a 3x3 foot area. Whereas these guys, and you can also do them in your house. They're not going to be stinky. If you've got a big house and you got a place where you can put a vermiculture composter, great. So this one, like I said, goes down into the ground. You put your scraps in there, and there's little holes here. The worms go in and out of there. You can also add the worms. We do sell worms right now. We're out of them. But when we do have them, you can add these worms to your compost pile. Forgot to mention, the tumbler actually wants to be in the sun. These are going to be more in a shady location, with same as your compost bin. But the tumbler will actually work in the sun because it's using the heat of the sun to help it to compost a little bit quicker. So we've got this one here that goes in the ground. I also have this one over here that's in layers. There's lots of videos out there. There's lots of information on how to do the vermiculture. I'm not going to go into that today, but maybe that'll be another one that we could do at another time. But as far as for concern for what we are trying to do today, really, there's not any way that you can mess this up, so don't be afraid to give it a try. I mean, like I said, what's the worst case scenario? You can throw it, you just throw it back in the trash and be done with it. But I think if you experiment with this and have a little faith in yourself, I think you'll be surprised at the results that you get. So if you have any questions, we're here at Green Thumb. We're in Lake Forest. We're right off of the 5 freeway and El Toro Road. Our IT manager our marketing manager has done a really good job of getting us out there on the internet. So if you Google Green Thumb Nursery in Lake Forest, we'll pop right up. We'll give you the directions on how to get here. There's a phone number if you have any questions and you need to call us. Be more than happy to help you with your composting questions. And I hope this was helpful to you, and have a great day.